There was one mistake a cowboy could make that would end his life before he even had the chance to reach for his gun. It had nothing to do with outlaws, and it had nothing to do with the weather. Some men on the trail were wearing over half a year's wages on their back, and every single piece of it had a reason for being there. Most people think they know what a cowboy carried, but the gear that actually kept these men alive looked nothing like what you've seen in the movies. These men covered over 1,000 miles of open country, sleeping on the ground, riding through storms, and pushing massive herds of cattle with nothing but the tools they could carry. What they built to survive is one of the most impressive stories the West ever produced. Before the cattle drives really got rolling in the late 1860s, most cowboys were still wearing whatever was left over from the Civil War. Old military boots, worn-out caps, canvas sacks for bedding. It was rough, mismatched gear built for a different kind of hard life. What happened over the next 20 years was something remarkable. These men, working in one of the most punishing landscapes in North America, started turning ordinary equipment into something extraordinary. The Great Plains were no place to be underprepared. You had scorching sun in the summer, sudden blizzards in the fall, and storms that could roll in with almost no warning. There were no towns to duck into, no supply stores just down the road. When something broke or wore out, you fixed it yourself, or you suffered the consequences. That pressure, day after day, trip after trip, is what turned working cowboys into some of the most practical engineers this country has ever seen. One of the first things any cowboy invested in was a proper hat. Before John B. Stetson introduced his Boss of the Plains in 1865, men on the frontier were making do with bowler hats and old military caps, neither of which stood a chance against the sun and wind of the open range. Stetson built his hat out of fur felt, beaver, or rabbit, and that material made all the difference. Cheaper wool felt would lose its shape the first time it got soaked through. Fur felt could take months of rain and sun and come out looking nearly the same as it went in. Cowboys didn't stop there. They started creasing the crown of the hat, pinching it into shape, which gave them a better grip on the brim in high winds so the thing didn't blow off their head during a hard ride. That high crown also trapped a small pocket of air that helped insulate against both the desert heat and the cold of the high country. And when water was scarce, a good Stetson could hold 2 to 3 quarts of water, enough to give a horse a drink when you were miles from the nearest creek. A quality Stetson ran between $5 and $10 in the 1880s. That's roughly $150 to $300 in today's money. And when you consider that most cowboys earned between $25 and $40 a month, that hat represented a serious investment. Men added leather stampede strings, thin strips that looped behind the ears or under the chin to make sure they never lost it in a stampede or a river crossing. They weren't being precious about it. They were protecting a tool they couldn't afford to replace. Think about that for a second. The next time you pull a baseball cap off the rack for $25, consider that a working cowboy spent nearly 2 weeks of wages on his hat and wore it every single day for years. That's how much it mattered. The boots told a similar story. Before the cattle drives changed everything, cowboys were riding in flat-heeled military surplus boots with round toes, and those boots were getting men killed. The problem was the stirrup. If a cowboy was thrown from his horse or his horse stumbled, a round toe could jam tight into the stirrup iron. If the horse kept moving, and they almost always did, the rider got dragged. Being hung up in a stirrup with a horse in full panic was one of the leading causes of death among drovers, and it was a terrible way to go. The solution was the Cuban heel, a high, slanted heel made of stacked leather. It acted like a brake inside the stirrup, stopping the foot from sliding too far through. Pair that with the pointed toe, which let a cowboy find the stirrup fast in the dark without looking down, and you had a boot designed around the reality of the job. The tall leather shaft protected against rattlesnake bites and the constant rub of stirrup leathers against the leg. Custom boots cost between $7 and $15, which was anywhere from $210 to $450 in today's dollars. For a man making $30 a month, that was real money. Chaps completed the picture from the waist down. In the thick brush country of South Texas, cowboys wore shotgun chaps, which were closed tubes of leather that wrapped tight around the leg and pushed thorns and branches out of the way. As the drives moved north into the open plains, bat-wing chaps became more common because the wider design gave better airflow in summer heat but could still be wrapped closed for warmth when the temperature dropped. In the northern ranges of Montana and Wyoming, where winter came hard and fast, woolly chaps made from Angora goat hide or sheepskin were the difference between a cold ride and frostbite. The saddle was, without question, the most important piece of equipment a cowboy owned. A good range saddle cost between $30 and $50 in the 1880s, somewhere around $900 to $1,500 today, and a fully rigged roping saddle weighed close to 40 pounds. That price and that weight both had a reason behind them. The key was something called the saddle tree, a frame made of laminated wood that was wrapped in wet rawhide and then left to dry. As the rawhide tightened, it created a rigid shell that spread the rider's weight across the muscles on either side of the horse's spine, keeping pressure away from the backbone itself. On a 1,000-mile drive, a horse with saddle sores was as good as useless. A horse that broke down in the middle of the plains left its rider stranded without much hope of rescue. The saddle tree wasn't a luxury. It was a guarantee that the horse could keep working. The horn on the front of the saddle came from the Mexican vaquero tradition, and it served a hard purpose. When a cowboy roped a steer, he needed something solid to anchor that rope against a few hundred pounds of panicked animal pulling in the other direction. Over time, the horn was made shorter and stouter so it wouldn't snap under the strain. The saddle also had rings and leather strings all over it, used to tie on canteens, bedrolls, rifles, and slickers. Everything the rider needed for days on the trail could be strapped to that saddle. When the sky opened up, and on the plains it really opened up, a cowboy reached for his yellow slicker. Those bright yellow coats came straight out of maritime culture. Sailors had been treating canvas with linseed oil and wax for years to keep the ocean spray out, and somebody figured out the same thing would work on the plains. Cowboys modified the design so that the back of the coat split open and draped over the saddle horn, keeping both the rider and the horse's back dry during hours of steady rain. The yellow color wasn't a choice for style. It was a side effect of how linseed oil aged, and they kept it because that bright color made riders visible to each other in heavy fog and downpour. When the sun went down and the ride was over, a cowboy rolled out his bedroll, and that piece of gear was more sophisticated than most people give it credit for. The outer shell was heavy canvas, often 18 ounces per square yard, treated to shed water and block wind. Inside, wool blankets did the real work. Wool holds about 80% of its insulating ability, even when it's completely soaked through, which meant a cowboy caught in a sudden rainstorm could still sleep without freezing. Inside the bedroll sat the war bag, a small canvas sack that held spare clothes and personal items, but also functioned as a pillow and a kind of portable savings account. Because there were no banks on the trail, some men converted their cash into trade goods, tobacco, silver buckles, quality knives, things that had real value and could be exchanged with other travelers when needed. The firearm a cowboy carried was far less dramatic in practice than in legend. Most trail bosses considered guns a liability around a herd because an accidental shot could trigger a stampede and cost more in cattle than most men earned in a year. The real survival thinking around firearms was mostly quiet and practical. The Colt single-action Army revolver had no internal safety, which meant that if the hammer rested on a live round and took a hard knock, it could fire on its own. Cowboys solved this by loading only 5 rounds and letting the hammer rest on the empty 6th chamber. 5 rounds in a 6-shooter, every time, without exception. For longer work, many cowboys carried the Winchester Model 1873 rifle alongside their Colt revolver, and they made sure both guns used the same ammunition, the .44 440 cartridge. One belt of bullets served both weapons, which kept the load lighter and the logistics simpler in country where resupply could be weeks away. Keeping the men themselves fed and healthy fell to the chuck wagon, invented by Charles Goodnight in 1866 when he converted a surplus army wagon into a rolling kitchen. Before that, cowboys carried what little food they could in bags tied to their saddles, and it was never enough. The chuck wagon carried salt pork, beans, and sourdough starter, which was one of the most carefully guarded items on the whole drive. That starter was living biology, wild yeast and bacteria cultivated from the air, and it allowed the cook to produce leavened bread in the middle of nowhere without any fresh ingredients. Lose the starter, and the crew ate flat bread for the rest of the trip. Cowboys also learned to supplement their diet from the land itself, drawing on knowledge passed down from Native American tribes. Breadroot and wild onions grew across the plains and provided vitamins that salt pork and beans couldn't deliver. Without those plants, scurvy was a real risk on a long drive, a disease that caused joint pain, bleeding gums, and eventually death. The men who stayed healthy were the ones who paid attention to what grew around them. What all of this adds up to is something worth sitting with. Every piece of gear these men wore, from the crease in the hat down to the heel of the boot, was the result of hard experience and careful thinking. They weren't working from a manual. They were solving problems in real time, in brutal country, with limited resources, and getting it right often enough that the cattle industry survived and grew into something that shaped the entire American West. These weren't men chasing glory. They were tradesmen doing dangerous work, and they were good at it. The gear they built and modified tells that story better than any six-shooter ever could. It tells you what they valued, what they feared, and how seriously they took the responsibility of making it home. So here's something worth thinking about. If you had to cross 1,000 miles of open country with nothing but what you could carry on horseback, which piece of gear from this list do you think would matter most to your survival? Drop your answer in the comments, because a lot of people watching this have thought hard about these things, and that kind of conversation is worth having.